Good morning to everyone. Welcome. Chag Sameach. Glad to see you and everyone on streaming. And we use the microphone because if we don't, those on streaming cannot hear us. They can see us but cannot hear us. So we're glad everybody's here enjoying their Chol Moed time as we've one more time worked to celebrate our redemption. And we're going to take a step backwards to Purim. Professor Spar is giving his second lecture on Purim. And one of the things that he talked about, or I hadn't even thought about, was that I knew that it took time for in my belief system, that the Torah to be canonized to what we know today. It took hundreds of years. But I never thought about Purim and the scroll becoming one. I always thought it was one story, one time, here it is. Here's the Cliff Notes, and we do that every year. But apparently, that is not the way it happened. It took time for the Purim story to become the story we know. And Ira, with his archaeological background and understanding of a synagogue in Syria, found mosaics on the walls of pictures that show Esther in a different light. And as he says, we know it must have been true back then because somebody put their name on as a donation. So when you put a donation on the wall, you know that it's important. And that gives you some credibility as to what Purim was at one point, and then later became canonized into what we know today. I'm not sure what that is, but Ira will certainly give us more detail, as he's already done, as to when that became more of the story that we know it is. But we're in part 2 for Purim, so Professor Ira Spar and family and company and all members today and those guests, we welcome you. Professor Spar, I give you the microphone. As David is continuing to make final adjustments here. Okay. Discovery of ancient Egypt. I think we're almost there. We're on the right day, right time. Professor Spar, I give you the microphone. Let's go to full screen. By the way, this will be recorded, and it'll go on our YouTube channel, so you can tell all your friends and family to check out our YouTube channel. As you go on synagogue.org, you'll find it, and you'll be able to see it. You can see his first lecture if you didn't get to see that one, and we get part 2. Before we start, we've got to figure out which end is up. The difficulty with that previous lecture. This is the magic thing here. It wouldn't work. Let's see now. How am I going to do this? One here, and one there. I need one more arm. I'm missing something. We got to use the pointer. So is David. Okay. The down arrow goes to the next slide. Okay. I have to wait a second before we start. I got to work on this. The down arrow goes, and the up arrow goes to the previous slide. And the star goes to the pointer. Oh, the star goes to the pointer. Welcome, everyone. Good to see everyone here again. I want to take us back to my youth. I loved watching CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. You remember that? That was great, but even better was Walter Cronkite when he intoned the following words. It was a day like all days, filled with those events that have altered and illuminated our times. And you are there. And so we're going to take us back, and you will be there 2,000 years ago at a synagogue
in ancient Syria. It was 1920 when a British soldier was digging a hole on a mound in the middle of the desert on this hill that you see behind us. I did it. Why do you like that? In the dusty desert of Syria, he's digging a foxhole, and there suddenly appears a wall with paintings. He called in a local archaeologist who happened to be in the area, and digging began a few years later on. And the site turned out to be Dura-Europus, founded by the successors of Alexander the Great and inhabited by a vast group of different types of peoples living in this desert community. So first, let us go back to the times when the Romans ruled the area. Now, the Romans had come to the Near East, and remember, they ruled over Israel, destroyed the temple in 70 of the Common Era, and then under King Trajan, they kept on expanding. And as they expanded, wait a second. Oh, I'm pushing this thing. Here we go. All right. So now they've conquered Israel, and this is the area they would want to expand to. Okay, push the down arrow. There we go. Okay. So I want to go back a little bit before the destruction of the temple. In 55 BCE, Crassus, the richest man in Rome, a man with great imperial ambitions and little brains, decided as the governor of Syria that he would be the one who could be the next Roman general. Of course, he had no experience, but what does that matter? He's the governor of Syria. It's a rich province. He'll tax the people to death. He'll lead the army, and he'll lead the army farther to the east so he can accumulate even greater amounts of money. Unfortunately, he didn't realize that the people he was going to attack were Persians, a group of type Persians called the Parthians, and he lost his head in the battle. Uh-oh. What happened, David? Okay. So Trajan ruled from 98 to 117 CE, but certainly soon afterwards, as his Roman armies had moved all the way down into Mesopotamia, he died and the Parthians took over again. Trajan died and the Romans had to withdraw from Syria. In 165, the Romans returned to the area under Lucius Durus. And at that time, under him, the area of Dura-Europus was settled and defended by the Romans. For the Romans, it was a fort, a great fortress that would protect its inhabitants from the Parthians who lived in the area. And as we look at Dura-Europus, you can see over here, see the walls of Dura completely encompassing the area. So, and it was located, as we shall see, right over here, right on the Euphrates River. So the area right around it has good grazeland, good crops can be grown there, plenty of water from the river. And if we look closely here, we can see the Romans had organized the place into streets, main streets, crisscrossing the entire area of the ancient site. And the thing to look at carefully is right over here. And we'll look at that. Oh, slide's not coming out too good. I'm sorry about that. But this is the now what? Okay. So, yeah, this is good enough. Yeah, I don't know why it's looking like this. So right over here is an outer fortification wall. It's the western wall of the site. And it's, they thought, impregnable. And right along that wall, if we look carefully, we'll see a Mithridaeum, a cultic site worshiping the god of the sun named Mithra. Nearby, a temple to Adonis. Nearby, Barb. No, that's the way it was. Because you can see it just extends all the way out. They built the walls around it. So as we look over here and we see the Temple of Bel, the Mithridaeum, the Temple of Adonis, the site of a synagogue, the Palmyran Gate, and oh, look at this, a church. 16 different religious buildings were built throughout this area, serving the Greek population, the Roman population, the Babylonian population, the Aramaic population, the Jewish population, the Christian population, and many, many others. Imagine living in this enclosed, protected area, protected by the Roman government. And there you were free to walk to your synagogue, to walk to your church, to walk to the temple, whatever you chose. Must have been an extraordinary sight at that time. Maybe because of the good, rich farmlands to the left and farmlands behind it, people estimate maybe there were only 5,000 people there. Some people say maybe 10,000. Okay, whatever it is. The site covers 180 acres. And in 1920, this British soldier dug a trench. The archaeologists came in, and they found that a huge wall that we see over here on the western side had protected the site only until the mid part of the 3rd century Common Era. And that's when the Persians returned. And as they returned, this defensive wall was not enough to protect them. So the inhabitants of the city decided what we must do, because they're going to have to attack against this wall. They can't come up from the Euphrates. It's too steep. The other areas are there's indentations. Again, it's too difficult to come into the city. So let's take all the buildings that are along the western wall and smash in their roofs and let the rubble fall down so that all of those, the Mithridaeum, the synagogue, the church, the temple to Adonis, on and on and on, would be covered with dirt, and that would be like a glacis, a huge area to support the actual western wall. And so when the area was excavated, they found that underneath the rubble, here were all sorts of buildings next to this gate opening. And the gate opening, by the way, is huge. If you stood over there and go about to the pillar, that's the width now of the gate opening. It's enormous. There are 2 sides to it. It's like a double Alamo. And one of the buildings they discovered right here was the synagogue. And if we imagine right over here, imagine over here these big pillars are in front of a room. You enter into the room and it's like 45 feet long and 25 feet wide. And as we look at this reconstruction here, 45 by 25 feet, and the walls are all covered with paintings of scenes from biblical times. This is the oldest known excavated synagogue with pictures on the wall of what they thought their ancestors, our ancestors, looked like. You tell me. Okay. So there it was on the wall. And after it was moved to Damascus, it's now in the National Museum of Damascus. But if you go there to the National Museum, you won't find it because there are no signs to it. You have to know it's there and weld your way all the way to the back room, and there you find a reconstructed synagogue. And on the walls, here are all the different types. This is only one wall. This is just the Western Wall. All the different types of scenes that we're going to look at today. And here is the first scene, right? As you walked in, you would walk up these steps. You walk in, oh, there must have been a curtain here. And this would be the ark. And above the ark are pictures. Pictures of a menorah. Pictures of the temple. Pictures of a ram in a bush with a man with a knife in his hand, an altar with a sacrifice on it. Where are we? The Akedah. Okay. And if we look closely and we see the knife in his hand and we look above, it's very hard to see in this picture, but there is a tent-like structure there, and inside there is a person. Looks like a youth, maybe teenage youth, maybe a little bit older, but his head is black, and so is the black head over here of Abraham with a knife. And this was a local tradition. Abraham did kill his son, Isaac. The fire on top of the altar, the sacrifice on top of the altar, does not show any flames, indicating that that was not burnt. Instead, Isaac was sacrificed. This is the local traditions now. We're looking at ancient Judaism, not just from the Bible, not just from the book of Esther, but from folk stories that surrounded the synagogues that were outside the periphery of Jerusalem, outside of the main areas which were in southern Babylon, way to the south. That's where the Talmud was written. But here in this desert community, they also had various variations. And by the way, Barb, being this is a synagogue, and looking at the wall over here, we notice something. You can't see it, but right over here it says, "And I paid for this." And it lists his name. Okay, so now we're going to continue. Yeah.
Those are very vibrant colors for 2,000 years old. Has that been restored or is that the original?
That's a very difficult question to answer. When the archaeologists came there, they took pictures in black and white. Okay? They didn't have color photography in the 1930s. But an artist was there with them, and he recorded all of these pictures the way he saw them. Unfortunately, he saw them after the technicians were there to preserve the wall. And the technicians had covered the wall with like a shellac, and that darkened the colors. So now this is a reconstruction based on removing the darkness of the shellac that the archaeologists had put on to try to reveal the initial colors. And different people over time at Yale University came up with different types of color schemes. So I'm trying to show the ones that detail the most, probably as close as we can come to what it originally looked like. Remember, this is under burial of mounds and mounds of dirt. So it's like ancient Egypt. The tombs are not disturbed, so you can actually see.
You don't have the sun.
Nothing is coming except for one area, because it rains here, and the rain did come down. So the front of the synagogue, where there were walls, and sometimes in the north and the south, the water did seep in. So we have probably 2/3 of the reliefs. So I want to continue by looking at all of these pictures that we see in front of us. And we did last time, we looked at the Purim. So remember, you're in right next to where the Persians are. So for them, the most important story is going to be about Ahasuerus, who is sitting here on his throne next to Queen Esther, and here is Mordecai, and here is Haman. And we went into this the last time. But I want to spend our time today on Moses and his successors. So right above the ark, there are 4 pictures of Moses. 1, 2, 3, 4, showing different aspects of his life. So if we look closely, we'll notice that Moses on the left-hand side is missing the top portion, but we can make out here, see this line? That's Mount Sinai. And he is on Mount Sinai. Wait, he took off his boots. The next picture shows him at the burning bush, and he wears sandals. And if this is him on Mount Sinai, and this is him, now we're seeing a first full picture of Moses, something is a little different than our medieval view of Jews, isn't it? Moses does not wear a yarmulke. He does not have payas. He's not wearing any tzitzis hanging down. He is garbed in a Roman toga called the Himation. And now, if we look at the same picture, farther above, we see the burning bush and the hand of God coming to Moses. And now Moses reads from the scroll. When Moses came down to the mountain and he approached the people of Israel, he read the words of the Lord to the people. Now, what did the words look like? Well, they were on stone tablets. But here is an indication that they also viewed it as a Roman papyrus. A Roman, not papyrus, a Roman leather scroll. And here he is reading from the scroll. And what is this down below? Look at the shape. Very carefully look at the shape. And that is a covering, a cloth that is over something in here, and we can see, looks like a box. So let's look first at Charleston Heston. Now, Charleston Heston has the Torah, has the 2 great stone tablets. And we can see the 10 Commandments on the stone tablets, right? But we know what stone tablets look like in the ancient world because we have them at museums throughout the world. And they don't look like this. None of them look like this. They look like this. On the left-hand side, you see a stone tablet. Now, how big is that stone tablet? That big. It's this big. And on it are written, for the goddess Inanna, who is the great lady, for his lady, the name of the king, Ur Dinger Namu, Nita Kalaga, the strong king, Lugal Kien Gima, meaning the king of the whole world, the 4 corners, and it continues with his titles over here and all on the other side. So what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We can almost fit the 10 Commandments on one side this big. So when he throws down the stones, throw them down. No big deal. Now over here, a little bit bigger tablet, but written on clay. And if you counted up the lines, you come to like 120 lines, could be written here. You could write the book of Exodus on one of these things. So again, we return. So what is here? If he has the scroll in his hands, this is where he's going to place the scroll. This is the Ark of the Covenant. And what does the Ark of the Covenant actually look like?
Yeah, don't break this one.
Looks like we have a whole batch of compartments here. And how big is this thing? Well, let's take another look. Oh, this is a coin. This is from Bar Kokhba's revolt. And they're going to show you right over here. Here is the Holy of Holies, and there is the Ark of the Covenant. And inside of the Ark of the Covenant, you see these little circles over here? This is a scroll. Roll up the scroll, put it on the shelf, and what would you see? Just the end of the scroll rolled up. So their idea, oh, here is the end of the scroll. You put it in a compartment, and within the ark, there are going to be compartments, little boxes, in which you put your little scrolls inside. So here is a Roman doctor, and the doctor has a little scroll in his hand with his prescriptions or his medications, and he's going to put it in a box. And notice, you see over here, see the end of the scrolls? And that's the way they conceived of the commandments being placed into the ark. And we even have, and those of you who are with me in Israel, and we went to a site and we saw, here is a picture of an ark on a mobile platform with wheels, a picture of the outer pillars of the temple, and there is the different compartments for the scrolls. So in the synagogue, this is what it would have looked like. So they could just roll it out into the middle, open the box, take out the scroll, and read it before the congregation. There's another view of the same thing when the ark is being transported, and we'll come back to this as well. So what do we have here now? Back to Moses. Moses is standing before us. Right at the bottom of his feet, he's wearing sandals. He's in a Roman toga called a himation. His arms are folded. And there is this. It looks here that behind his head is this dark bluish black. And above him, what's this? And over here, this is the sun and the moon, but look closely. And it's very hard to see. We shut off the lights. Can you see these stars? Here is the emperor of Rome, Septimius Severus. And what do we see around Septimius Severus? Over here, okay? Imperator, Caesar, Supreme Commander, Lucius Septimius Severus Pertinax, the Valiant One, Augustus, the Emperor. See the number 2 over here in his second consulship. And over here, okay, right, happy with good fortune. And here is the moon, and here are the 7 stars. The gods have crowned him the Emperor of Rome, and the gods are in heaven. So, why is his hair white? He's past old. Moses has gone to heaven, and now he's in heaven with the sun and the moon and the stars. And when you put your hands like this, it's a sign of penitence before your Lord. So Moses has now ascended to heaven. He's before God. But wait a second, the God of the sun, the stars, and the moon? Is that God? If you know your Bible, Adonai Tsevaot, Lord of hosts. The hosts are the sun, the moon, and the stars. He is before the hosts of God in heaven. So next time you see Lord of Lord, Lord of hosts, you know you're actually referring to the divine attendance of God in the heavens. So now we'll go to a familiar scene, right? So everyone knows the story. Who's this? Looks just like Ahasuerus, but it's not. Bob, it's the Pharaoh. And you've now welcome to Egypt. It says welcome to Egypt. You see the doors are open? Okay, so this is the fortresses of Egypt. You walk through the door and look above here. Now we see this curtain. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So Act 1, okay, we have the Pharaoh here. The Pharaoh has a scribe. He's writing in a book. Roman Empire, they're writing not only in scrolls, but they're writing in books. And as he takes the dictation, his assistant over here puts out his arm, signaling to us that we move into Act 2. And in Act 2, we see 2 ladies of the court and their slave doing the wash in the Nile. Act 3, okay, they've now come to another area of the Nile. And 3 ladies with wash basins in their hands that has a little laundry inside. These are laundry bags. And next to them, we're not quite there yet. We have to go down here. Who is this? This is Moses, right? Who saves him from the Nile? Pharaoh's slave is with him in the Nile and gives the baby to Pharaoh's daughter. So here, how can you tell it's Pharaoh's daughter? Because on her arms, she wears necklaces. She's not the slave, and she gives the baby to Miriam and Jochebed. And what down is this down here? This is the basket. Does it look like a basket? So the ancient idea, the word in Hebrew that we translate as basket, actually means box. And so it was understood in ancient times that it was put into a box.
Is this picture on the wall in the synagogue?
Yeah. All I'm showing is on the wall. But that's the local traditions now. So over here we see the lady doing the wash. Okay. No, the Bible has a story about the slave picking up the baby and handing it to the princess. Okay? And what do we have here? We can see a close-up of the necklaces on her arm and the earrings on her ears. This is Pharaoh's daughter. But that is the box. Now, here's a Haggadah from the 14th century. They understood that the basket was a box. And Noah and the ark from the catacombs of Rome, the same word for basket is used for the ark. So the ark, which we think of as a big crescent-shaped boat, is actually a box. And here is Noah emerging from the ark, the box. From another Haggadah, again, they're building the ark. They're building the ark in the form of a box. Now, of course, this is, I guess that is Kentucky, isn't that where it is? Okay. And there is our traditional view of the ark and all the animals going into the ark. So where did the concept of an ark come from? Because it's not ancient. They always thought of the basket as a box. And the answer comes from this ark right over here. And on this ark, we have Noah, Mrs. Noah, and their sons. And the ark is actually a Muslim dhow, D-H-O-W, which was used to trade from Persia to go to India. So this particular picture comes from Tariq of Rashid al-Din in the 14th century, who has commissioned a book on the history of the world. And the history of the world goes back to the Bible. And in the Bible, this is a picture now of Moses. And it's very interesting because, see, everybody look at their eyes, looks a little oriental, because the ruler of Iran at this time was a descendant of Genghis Khan from China, the Mongols. So you have Mongol pictured type of peoples depicting the ark, which then became standard in Western literature. And I did an exhibition on this one time at the Met, and I borrowed this picture from its owner in Geneva. Okay. Oh, sorry. Well, where does the story come from? Sargon, the mighty king am I. My mother was an Entu priestess. I did not know my father. My uncle dwelled in the mountains. My city is Azuripanu, which is situated on the banks of the Euphrates. My mother conceived me. In secret she bore me. She set me in a basket of rushes. With bitumen she sealed my lid. She cast me into the river, which rose not over me. And the river bore me up and carried me to Aki, the drawer of water. And Aki, the drawer of water, took me as his son and reared me, appointed me as his gardener. And while I was a gardener, Ishtar, the great goddess, granted me her love, and for many years I exercised kingship. Sargon the Great lived 1,000 years before Moses. Are they copying the story of Sargon from 1,000 years before? Almost sounds like it. Almost sounds like it. Sargon means Shar, which means king. And the last part, Gan, is Ukin in Babylonian, which means legitimate. I am the legitimate king, which means he's a usurper. At the time the Bible was being put together, there was a king of Assyria. And that king of Assyria is mentioned in the Bible. It's the end, towards the middle part of the 8th century BCE. And he's attacking in the northern part of Israel. And his name is Sargon. And in the 8th century, the Bible was starting to be put together. So Sargon was the great king who founded the Babylonian Empire, the great king, the greatest king of the Assyrian Empire, who's attacking Israel at this time. So we have to be like Sargon. You see, Moses was born just like the great ruler of Assyria. So our Moses is just as great as any Assyrian ruler. And after all, the great Sargon, who lived in the 23rd century BC, he was the founder of the Babylonian people. Moses is the founder of our people. And they come to the sea. And Moses here, and we look carefully at Moses now, notice his hair is all black. He's not dead as he was when he went up to heaven. And he gives the word. We recognize this, don't we? That's from the movies. That's Charleston Heston, right? With his rod over. And here are the Egyptians drowning in the sea. So he gives his announcement, let the waters come and overwhelm them. And here he sticks out his rod again. And notice the color of the rod. And notice the color of the rod. Death to the Egyptians. And now the hand of God is over him as he gives the final blow to the Egyptians. And over here, now this is very unusual. This is not in the Bible. These are the Israelites after they have crossed the sea. And look down over here. What are here? Fish in the sea. So the waters have returned. They've crossed the sea. And now here are all the Israelites lined up with shields. This is the army of Israel. And what is the army of Israel going to look like? A close-up? Look closely now. God has protected Israel's army. And above each of them, notice these poles. And I'm sure you've seen these poles before. They are the standards of the Roman army. So our ancestors who defeated the Egyptians, who was great like Moses, when they defeated the Egyptians, we were like the Roman armies. And we marched then, and that explains the Joshua story, because we now have a great army with each of our different sections holding on a pole with the name of each one of the Roman legions. And now we will go into the land as a Roman legion and we will conquer the land. That's not in the Bible, by the way. Now Moses appears again. And here he appears, I keep on pushing the wrong button. Here he appears at a well. And coming out of the well are streams of water. And the streams of water attach themselves to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Where's the 12? 12. To 12 tribes of Israel. And as they understood this in a midrash, the streams of water coming out of what was called Miriam's well are actually the streams of Torah. So that the streams of Torah will follow the Israelites as they come into the land of Israel. And look carefully at the different tribes. Because when this was discovered, why are their hands up like this? This was a great discovery for Christian art, because Christian art maintained that it was distinctive from Jewish art. And you see on the right Christian art, you see the arms hanging up? This is a Christian symbol. No, it's not. It's a Jewish symbol. So Christian art now has its origins in Jewish art going back to the 3rd century BCE. And that was a great revelation for historians of Christian art. That part is not shown in the picture. I mean, they don't really go into that, but you could assume that he hits the rock, but he hits a rock. This is the well. So they combine the two stories together of hitting the rock and the well, because it's called Miriam's well. They're two separate stories. Okay, let's continue. Here we go. So now we'll turn to another picture. And this is the picture just to the right of the Purim scene. So in the middle of the ark, they have the ark right in the middle. To the left was the Purim scene. Why was this scene put next to it? And that's a great mystery, because here is Samuel the prophet. And Samuel the prophet is pouring oil over the head of David. And this is supposed to be all of David's siblings. A little bit different from the biblical story. But by pouring the oil over David, you're anointing David. And the word to anoint David, the verbal form, is mashach, which leads to the word Mashiach. So the descendants, here we live in this desert community, surrounded by enemies, only protected by Rome. And we are the descendants of David. And the Messiah will rise again to save us from whatever fate might befall us. Now, they also chose to depict the temple. And as we analyze the temple scene, here we see the Ark of the Covenant, right? Here are the boxes, and the scrolls are inside of the boxes. Here is that ark that goes on top, which is a symbol of the emergence of God in Roman art. And we have a menorah. We have over here candlestick. 2 candlesticks. Over here, an altar. And over here, the high priest, and his name is given as, can you read it? Aaron. So Aaron is the high priest, and notice the different curtains over here indicating different scenes. Well, Aaron's sons didn't do too well, did they? What are those? What's this? That's the shofar. That's trumpets. See the trumpets? They're blowing the trumpets to announce something important. They're announcing the importance of a bull, an ox, and a ram that are going to be sacrificed. And here he's blowing the shofar to announce the time, and another person brings along the red heifer. And the red heifer is being purified. But where are we? Are we in the temple in Jerusalem? Are we in Herod's temple? Or are we in someplace else? And we look inside of here and we see the same tall columns that we've seen several other places, indicating that we must be someplace in the Greco-Roman world. But the roof and the walls are brown. And on the top of the roof are Nike, gods of liberty, victory. Does the temple have a brown roof? No. What has a brown roof? The Ohel Moed, the Mishkan in the desert. And so below, the temple does not have 3 doors that open. Only the tabernacle in the desert has 3 open doors. The middle one, according to the Bible, which is covered by a curtain. And that's in our house, a reconstruction. This is what we use for Hanukkah. So here's the Ohel Moed, the tabernacle in the desert. And notice 3 openings over here and the brown covering of goat skin on the top, the curtain in front, the altar over here, and a wash basin over there. So they're combining elements from the past and it's bringing us back to the desert community of Moses. God comes into the Mishkan in the form of a cloud when he is resident. Now here's another view. But this is a view which is a little bit different. Because here are the pillars. Here is a doorway now, shaped differently than we saw from the Mishkan, but with the 4 openings of the boxes here, a pediment for a roof. Here are Nike over here, but below are 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So this is the temple of Jerusalem. This is Solomon's temple. Well, they're trying to, the perspective of Parthian art is always frontal. When you combine different time periods together, then you get that sense. Because each member of the curtain is a different time period of the Ohel Moed. That's what perspective doesn't come in until later on in art. Here's our Nike, and we're going to see it again. And now we turn to images of Elijah. Now notice the pattern that's going on. Moses is the founder. David is the Messiah. Achashverosh and Queen Esther and Mordechai save the Jews. And Elijah and the widow over here, according to the biblical story, the widow has a baby. The baby is dying or dead. Elijah comes and saves the baby. But I want to go to the next slide about Elijah. And here is a famous scene, 1 Kings 18. Here's the famous scene. It's one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. Here is why do I push the wrong button all the time? Here is the altar. And on top of the altar is a sacrifice. And notice the sacrifice is burning. So who can burn the sacrifice? This is gunfight at the OK Corral, because the king and his advisors have been challenged by Elijah. Elijah has the word of God, and your prophets and your supporters do not have the word of God because you worship the wrong God. You worship Baal. So this is going to be the confrontation on the top of Mount Carmel. And over here, we see the men bringing the wood. The men bringing the wood, piling the wood up for the fire. And over here, one guy with a little rod over here. And they're bringing buckets of water to put out the fire. So who are these big men over here? These are the prophets of Baal. And they've been challenged. Here's the wood. Here's the altar. Can you cause the sacrificial altar, the sacrifice, to burn? And so they chant, and they chant, and they chant, and they chant, and nothing happens. So Elijah the prophet says, chant again. And they chant again, and they chant again, and they chant again, and nothing happens. And Elijah the prophet says, what's the matter with Baal? Is he on the phone? Is he on the toilet? Has he gone for a walk? Is he on a journey? Or is he just sleeping? By the way, the last part, that's really in the Bible. He just must be sleeping. Or he's busy with some appointment. Elijah calls upon God. And God causes the animal to burn. And all of the prophets are then killed by order of the king. But a very strange picture emerges, which is not in the Bible. Well, it sort of is not in the Bible. There's one line in the biblical text that says, Hiel built the town of Jericho. And that's it. Who the hell is Hiel? That's him. And the story goes that Hiel has been called upon by the prophets, and he will enter into the inner part of the altar, and he will cause the sacrificial body of the animal to burn. But God calls upon a serpent, and the serpent enters, sneaks through. This is the serpent ordered by God, and he destroys Hiel. It's not in the Bible, but this was a folk story that was remembered in the Midrash and was part of the wall decorations. Ezekiel also has the story we read on Shabbos, the story of the dry bones, the bones coming together. Why are the bones there? Because Jerusalem has been destroyed by the Babylonians. And Ezekiel is a prophet who had to escape from Jerusalem, and he went into Babylon, and there he lived, and he saw the dead of Israel. Israel was dead, represented by the bones, the dried bones. But a story will come where God will save us. He will resurrect the bones. And so here is Ezekiel the prophet. Again, no tzitzis, no yarmulke, no tallis. And here are all the decomposed parts. No bones are shown in this version, but decomposed parts of Israel. And God's hand comes down. Scene 1, Chuck, scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. And God's hand comes down in different stages of what is going on. So he raises his hand up to touch. Notice the finger? Touch the fingers. And puts his hand out towards a mountain. And in the mountain, here are all of these dead, severed heads. And the Bible says there was a great noise. Just leaves it like that. Ra'ash in Hebrew. The noise was interpreted in the folk tales as an earthquake. And an earthquake came up and it severed the mountain into two pieces. And the fortress on the top of the mountain came tumbling down. And the bodies over here were now brought back together. But they're dead. They've been reconstructed, but still they are dead. And then here's the prophet again, putting out his arms. Can we bring the dry bones back to life? The dead could be revived. Jews do believe in the resurrection of the dead. It's right there in the Bible. And so he calls upon God, and God sends 3 angels shown in the forms of Nike. And the word is they bring breath back to the bones. And here is the Nike with her hands on the heads of the dead, and Israel will rise again. follow-up to this. This is very unusual. The dead will rise again, okay. Here is the hand of God. And now the dead have arisen, and we can tell the dead have arisen because the mountain is now not broken in half, and an olive tree grows, and olives are sprouting out from the trees. And the prophet stands here, and he points to the resurrected bones of Israel. 1 tribe, 2 tribes, 3 tribes, 4 tribes, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You see, the tribes of Israel have been resurrected. What's wrong? We're missing 2. They're right here. They were never resurrected. These are the people who did evil in the eyes of God. They didn't deserve to be resurrected. The Babylonians came into the city, and they wanted to show this. This is Jerusalem. This is the altar in the temple. These are the Israelites. And these are all the Babylonian warriors with knives in their hand and clubs to sever the throats and hanging onto the altar. This is the destruction of Jerusalem. But Israel will rise. The Battle of Ebenezer. Okay, in 1 Samuel 4, these on the bottom are the enemy. These are the Philistines, knives in their hands, severing or destroying or killing the Israelites below. The Philistines on their horses. The battle above, Israel is defeated. And the ark is taken captive. And the ark is brought. And the ark is brought to the temple of Dagon, the god of the Philistines. But God will come and save us. Again, God will come and save us from the destructions we have seen. And so here is the inside of the temple of Dagon. There is a statue standing up. This is 1 statue, 1 offering table, 1 altar. Scene 1. Scene 2, the statue is now headless. God has destroyed the temple. The head has been broken off. All the cultural implements that went on here and went on here are now scattered on the ground. And the Israelites have recaptured the Ark of the Covenant. See the shape? And here's the curtains surrounding it. And here are the wheels. We've seen all this before, right? Okay? And they're transporting it with 2 oxen back now eventually to return to Jerusalem under King David. Okay, this is Miriam's lecture, but I'm not going to go into it. On the roof of the synagogue, there were roof tiles, and I'm just going to show pictures of the roof tiles. And what could they mean? I want to end with this. This is the only known Jewish building, the only known synagogue, where at the entranceway to the door into the house of the assembly, through that door, and that door which you can't see, which is right over here, there were 2 doors coming into the shul. And the doorposts, we see these little things at the top. In ancient buildings, they had posts, actual door posts, and they were set into rocks, into the curved bottom, and the posts then shriveled. The door posts shriveled on the rock, and underneath the rock were found fingers, human fingers. This is not in the Bible. But there is a little hint of what it could be. sorry. Why do they go to the cemetery? In the Talmud it's written. With regard to this, there is a difference of opinion between Rabbi Lev Haman and Rabbi Hanina. One says to signify that we are as the dead. But the other said, in order that the dead should intercede for mercy on our behalf. We go to the synagogue to pray for the resurrection of the dead. Resurrection of the dead. Jesus' resurrection was part of the Talmudic commentary. But whose finger could it be that would be buried underneath the doorpost of the synagogue? So underneath Babylonian doorposts, underneath the sill that you entered into a room, there were little statues of gods to protect you. But I think this pagoda explains the story. When the Buddha was killed, when the Buddha died rather, at an old age, probably from food poisoning, his body was cremated. And they took the ashes and they spread the ashes all over the kingdoms. But there was still some remnants left. And according to a story, it must be a legend, it can't be right, that this little part of his finger was preserved. And according to legend, it was preserved in a temple. And the temples, according to the legend, went from one place to the next place to the next place. And finally, hundreds of years ago, not thousands, but hundreds, maybe like 600 years ago, it ended up outside of the city of Xi'an, 70 miles to the east in a place called the Famen Temple. And that's where it resides to this day. No, it doesn't. There's no indication of anything like that in the Famen Temple. Until in the 1950s, there was an earthquake at the temple. And in this pagoda right here, which is not that big, in the middle of the pagoda, there were these big rocks like this. They are slabs for the floor, and it cracked. And when you took a flashlight and put it down through the crack, you could see there were steps right underneath the central altar in this shrine. And they took out the big slabs and walked down the staircase and into a tunnel. And along the tunnel were gold and silver reliquaries, all lining up on all sides along a hallway which led to an inner room. And in the middle of the inner room, again, all sorts of gold and silver. And there in the middle, in a gold and silver, about this high reliquary, is the bone of the Buddha. So it's a universal story. You have the bone of the Buddha because it will help you in the resurrection of the dead. Around 244 BCE, a descendant of Sasan who gave his name to the new Sasanian dynasty defeated the Parthians. He was succeeded by Shapur I. Here is Shapur I, the great king of Persia. And Shapur led his armies into Dura and against the Romans. When he came across the Roman emperor, right over here, Valerian, to the left, you see the emperor, Shapur on his horse, the emperor and his assistant bowing down, and he took him captive. And the emperor, the Roman emperor, died in captivity. And they attacked Dura-Europus. The Persian armies attacked from 250 to 256. They fortified the western wall, covered the synagogue and other buildings with dirt to form a glacis barrier. The Persians built ramps up against the walls and dug out tunnels beneath the walls in order to get into the city. The Romans stood up. Roman armor was found in the site. Roman shields, Roman corselets of iron preserved under the tons of dirt. But it was too late. The community of Dura was obliterated and never resettled. So we come to the end. What was the synagogue walls all about? What were the themes of the synagogue? You have a new community in the desert trying to get together with all of these other churches and shrines to a whole batch of other gods. How are we distinctive? Notice they didn't show images of Joshua defeating the Canaanites, because that would be an attack on the other churches or houses of worship. Instead, they showed scenes of the Messiah, of resurrection, of our victories against the Philistines. No one cares about the Philistines anymore. But what did they pray to in the middle of the shul when they took out the scroll from the ark? What did the community have to say? What did the service look like? That we will never know. Thank you so much.
Outstanding. Any final questions for Ira? David, you have to use the microphone because I can't hear you.
I was always raised that there was an image of the two guys with the stick, and they're carrying this big thing of grapes with the land of plenty. How come I didn't see that in any of these paintings here?
That's a great question. For years, first of all, an archaeological answer to that. Honey in the Bible. Well, there is no honey in Israel. Absolutely no honey. Must be from date trees. That's where they must have gotten their honey from. But about 20 years ago, a group of Israeli archaeologists came to a place called Tel Rehov. And in Tel Rehov, they found intact houses filled with shrines to the Canaanite gods and Canaanite goddesses. And along with that, they excavated a whole set of aviaries. So Israel was the land of milk and honey because it was a center of bee culture. And the bees were actually imported from Turkey. So that meant they said that there were so many bees in here that they would have enough for domestic consumption and could be exporting it throughout the entire Mediterranean region. So it was literally a land of milk, meaning the animals, and honey. And that was one way of depicting it, with people carrying the produce of the land because the land was so rich. Other questions?
Good.
That's it? No more questions? No, in the words of Walter Cronkite, and you were there.
Thank you, Ira, very, very much. What's your question?
Okay. If you want to see the reconstruction of the not the walls, but the paintings that were on the walls as described by the Yale artists, they're in the gallery at Yale University. Oh, and one other thing. When I first saw some of these pictures, and I saw this is the Purim picture, and I saw there was a bunch of lines on the legs of Haman. I said, what the hell is that? Is it trying to show something about his physical condition? And it wasn't until I saw the painting at the Yale Gallery that I recognized, no, I tried to read it, those were inscriptions. I tried to read it, I couldn't read it. They were in Judeo-Persian. And what did they say? Oh, nice tour. This is really great. Good job, guys. And different people's they were giving tours of the synagogue to show off the greatness of the Jewish community at the time.
Extraordinary lecture. I guess that our history is not quite the way we know it today, from however it recreated into the canon that we take today, but now we know the rest of the story, or a good portion. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of Passover. May your matzah last till next Tuesday.